Grand strategy. It is a very particular genre played by very particular people with very particular expectations for the games that they're getting into. They're not strategy games in the basic sense, like Company of Heroes, for example, where you take command over a handful of squads, maybe a dozen units at most, or even a game like Command Modern Operations, on a far larger scale, but you are still limited purely to the military operations of whatever scenario you're playing out. Nor is it a strategy game like a city builder or a tycoon game, where you take over the operation and running of, well, the city or a theme park or a rail yard or anything like that. Instead, inherent to the genre's very name, grand strategy, the idea is that you are taking command on a grand scale. You are leading an entire nation, a civilization, or indeed a species. You are taking control over their economy, their diplomacy, their politics, their industrial capacity, their agricultural produce. It is your responsibility to look out for the nation as a whole, including, obviously, the military. This is why I absolutely hate the idea that Victoria 3 will not have any direct military control beyond assigning generals and telling them to attack or defend. This is a ridiculous simplification and obvious casualization of one of the best grand strategy game series out there. It is yet another step in the direction towards watering down absolutely everything to appeal to the broadest, lowest common denominator. And this has been a trend in Paradox's development for years now. Imperator Rome is the crown example, and Victoria 3 is heading down the path of making money of the same mistakes as that god-awful video game, in that they are getting rid of the depth and the complexity in favor of a more cookie-cutter, easy-to-implement system. And make absolutely no mistake, this is not done because Paradox feels like this will totally make the game so much better. No, this is laziness. I have no patience for this whatsoever. Paradox has not made a good combat system for decades now. Europa Universalis 2 has practically the same combat system as Imperator Rome does. And their AI is actual literal garbage. Hearts of Iron is probably one of the better combat systems that Paradox has ever made, and even that is simply just reusing all the Hearts of Iron games for its combat code. And even then, the AI is brain dead. Even after several expansions, DLC paid expansions as well, supposedly improving its performance, it is still useless. To the point that it can't even use half of the mechanics in the game. The AI still does not engage with the supply system. It launches amphibious invasions and disregards supply entirely, regardless of whether or not the invasion is cut off because the AI is too stupid to handle it. It still can't use naval mines even, because even that DLC feature is too goddamn complex for Paradox's AI. And so instead of buckling down and making a better product, Paradox has decided to go the creative assembly route. Sync kills are too difficult or annoying to implement in Total War Warhammer? Yeet the feature. Agents are kind of annoying to balance and people keep bitching about them? Yeet the feature in Three Kingdoms. And we could go on. CJI is annoying to program, so let's just have every city have one wall. And right there is a perfect point to address the devil's advocate as well, because I used to be the devil's advocate. When Creative Assembly showed us single wall siege battles, they also said, hey, this will make the AI way better. It'll be able to react to threats now. It'll be able to have reserves. It'll be able to bring units onto the walls. By the way, we're also going to let units just teleport off walls as well, because it'll make it easier for the AI, but it'll be way better, guys. Trust us. And I believe them. I figured, okay, well, if that's actually true, then this is a worthwhile sacrifice. But they didn't do that. They added nothing to the AI. They added nothing in terms of mechanics or interesting features. They had simply saved themselves a lot of work. And could Paradox's new system be good? Sure. The idea front has a lot of promising potential. If, say for example, you had a far more complicated system that took into account the training level, the veterancy, the age, the equipment, the artillery support, the supply situation, the proclivities of the generals, what kind of maneuvers he was carrying out, the terrain with multiple simulations on a much larger scale, and you could see running battles played out in the simulation. You could see the outcomes, you could see the units engaging, withdrawing, using the terrain to outflank the enemy. If you did all this, a skirmish phase, an artillery phase, a reconnaissance, armored thrust, if you added in this, I would not at all be annoyed about the inability to choose where to move specific units. It could be great if you saw this simulation played out in real time in front of you. But will they do that? No. I am willing to put goddamn money down on it. All we know so far about how the combat system will work, beyond what they've said in the dev diaries already, they have circuitously been avoiding explaining the exact mechanics of the combat so far, but from what we've seen, it looks like every other Europa Universalis style system. You will have a score, arbitrary score for your units, their quality. Your general will have an arbitrary number of stars or traits, which will give a small percentage bonus here and there, and you will have an arbitrary number of units, like 10 battalions, and then there'll be a dice roll, and maybe terrain will have a plus and minus effect. It's the goddamn same combat system we have seen since, again, Europa Universalis bloody 2. Now again, if they decide to do something more, then color me both surprised and happy, but they're not going to. They are not going to, because Paradox is not the company they once were. Imperator Rome proved this to us. Hell, Crusader Kings 3 proved this to us. We were overjoyed because at least we were getting 60-70% of the old game, better than nothing. But you can look at all of the simplifications. The city building system, that's gone. The various units in an army, that's gone. And what have they actually given us? Really? Well, fancier graphics. Great. Fantastic. Or even worse, another way they could approach this as well is go, you know what? People like combat. People like combat systems. We've put out, what is it now, 3 paid DLC expansions for Hearts of Iron, focusing on air warfare and naval warfare, and now most latest on the logistical system side of warfare and a tank designer. How about we just DLCify the hell out of the combat system Victoria 3? You think I'm crazy? Maybe I am. Maybe I am. Maybe they actually genuinely believe that removing one of the biggest key components of a grand strategy game will actually make for a better video game. No. I don't think for an instant they believe that. I think that when they say that they made this decision because they actually believe it'll make for a better game is a lie. They mean that it'll make for a game that's easier for us to make, because we don't have to worry about making a combat system anymore. We always get critiqued for it anyways, because we're not very good at this, so how about we just shove that all to the side, remove it entirely, save ourselves a lot of bother, a lot of work, and instead we'll go over to oversimplify everything else as well. We'll downplay the economic aspects a little bit. Maybe we'll expand upon it in, I don't know, DLC at some point. That would at least fit nicely into the pattern of behavior that Paradox has so thoroughly established over the last few years. And I don't even necessarily mind the DLC. Making a truly grand strategy game with all of the mechanics you want is a big undertaking. It requires a lot of time, a lot of development, a lot of man hours, a lot of effort, a lot of design. Adding in naval mines, adding in a logistical system to Hearts of Iron, adding in a ship designer, adding in unit designers. All of these things are work, absolutely. and I am happy to support the continued development of these titles. The problem is when you see the pattern so clearly that every new title is lesser than the title you just left. When the new Hearts of Iron is lesser than 4, when the next Victoria is lesser than 2, when the next Crusader Kings is lesser than 3, and you have the same amount of DLC again. The systems are already there. The logistical system is there now. The air control system is there now. The naval combat, as awful as it is there now. There is no excuse why it should simply disappear, even if it was just Paradox's god-awful combat, which again seems to just be what they're doing, but on an even more ambiguous scale with Victoria 3, is the same shit we've always had. And so as long as we're at least not going backwards, that's one thing. But now, we actively are to remove actual warfare, to remove the warfare system in Victoria, a period of tremendous conflict. An incredible technological advancement in that conflict is absolutely absurd. Oh, and just as a final note as well, in case you thought that the naval elements would avoid the same purge, of course not. You will also not be able to take any kind of direct control of your navies. You will not even be able to order your navies to simply seek and destroy the enemy. Instead, you simply have, again, 2 or 3 options: patrol, support convoys, or raid convoys. All of the actual influence is taken right out of your hands, and it is done purely because the developers can't be goddamn bothered to make something better. An uncharitable assumption? Sure. But after half a decade plus of seeing that assumption justified again and again and again, at some point, you just gotta call a spade a spade. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Hopefully in the Paradox comment sections, yelling at them as loudly and as stridently as you can muster. Have a good day.